Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk. I hope everybody is doing well and has had a good first half of their week. It's been a busy one for me thus far, but it's been a good one, broadly. Actually, the weather has been absolutely glorious here. As some of you now may know, those of you that are in a certain chat group on Facebook will know that we are in a high-risk period for the next week or so for wildfires, which in this part of Scotland doesn't happen particularly often, but when it does, it does. The good news is they shouldn't come anywhere near where we are, so we should be fine. However, just to the south of us here, there is a woods which is pretty darn dry at the moment, so that could certainly pose a risk potentially. And it's only maybe, a 5-minute stroll away to that woods. So, there is potential, but hopefully not. A little bit further to the south of us and to the west of us, and also towards Edinburgh, that's probably the highest risk area. We have a set of hills here called the Pentland Hills, and they have had wildfires just recently, but there is a possibility that they could start up again. So, and then there's Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh itself, which has had wildfires before. So, it could be interesting. There certainly could be a lot of smoke and stuff like that. So, it makes for an interesting period. But so the piece of music that we started the show off with is a piece I wrote called They Shall Not Grow Old. And I think it serves as a pretty good piece of music for VE Day, which most countries around the world observe during that first week of May, culminating in the act of remembrance and celebration which takes place on May 8th, which for me is today, but seeing as it's now just past midnight. For you guys in the United States, that will be tomorrow. And where we basically remember that World War II came to an end with the German unconditional surrender coming into effect on May 8th. So so that was the end of the war in Europe. Meanwhile, the war in Japan was still ongoing. And that was 80 years ago this week, and in fact 80 years ago today. So that's why I wanted to start the show with that, because I think it's important to acknowledge the importance of World War II and the sacrifice that was made by all of those that took part in it, whether they survived, whether they were unscathed physically. They were probably mentally traumatized by what they experienced and what they saw. And of course, those who were wounded and those who were killed, who have a known grave. And of course, those who were killed and have no known grave, they are somewhere out there, lying where they fell probably, and nobody knows where they are. So I wanted to acknowledge them in an important way. My grandfather took part in World War II. He fought through North Africa and Italy and was wounded in North Africa and came home. That was the end of his war. He basically had his foot blown off, and that was the end of his war. So I wanted to honor them in particular. So that's kind of why I started the show with that particular piece of music. I hope everybody is okay with that, and we'll end the show with that piece of music as well. just because I think it rounds everything off quite nicely. However, there is another cause for celebration tonight. This is show 100 of Songwriting Simplified being hosted on my channel. So that's a pretty awesome achievement. And so that's going to be the focus for this evening. So if you have questions, as per usual, we will get to those. If you've got questions on songwriting, composing, arranging, music theory, and all of that stuff, then I would be delighted to take your questions, for sure. But I'm particularly excited that this is show 100. I think that's a pretty epic achievement. It has been an absolute blast, I tell you. It really has been a total blast doing these shows over the last... I don't know how long it's been. Obviously, it's been 100 shows, but I don't... I can't remember exactly when I started doing these shows full time. I think it was quite likely back in the day when I was still living in Edinburgh. So I think that's kind of where it started. I think. But it has been an absolute blast, and we have had some regular people who have been to every single show. And among those people is Bobby Booth. Bobby Booth has never missed a show. As far as I'm aware, he has never missed a single show. And Kyle Trajuziak has been around pretty much for every one of those 100 shows as well. I'm pretty certain of that. But yeah, I want to say a massive thank you to all of you who have watched these shows, either passively just sat back and watched them, or you have taken part and you have asked questions, and you have helped make this show what it is. I want to give you a very, 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 very big thank you from the bottom of my heart for making this show work in the way that it has. I really enjoyed doing the show with Jonny. It was great doing the show with him. But I have actually really enjoyed doing the show on my own as well. There is a degree to which I miss the banter that Jonny and I had and the way that we interacted, and there are some very memorable shows that he and I did where Jonny ended up just laughing hysterically and was unable to stop, and we had to fit at the giggles. Those of you that have been around through that period of Songwriting Simplified as well may remember such things as the toilet song, which was an accidental song that we ended up improvising in show, and it was hilarious. Songwriting Simplified has had many a great amusing highlight, to say the least. But there's somebody else that I also want to thank. And that is, he's not here. I don't think he's here tonight, but Rich Cresswell, I also want to thank, because in the last few years, he and I have partnered together for creating some of these challenges that we've had for Halloween and for Christmas. The last 2 or 3 years we've had these, and they have been remarkably successful. They have been really, really surprisingly successful. I have really found them to be really beneficial for me. Not just the fact that I've been able to run them on my show and we've given prizes away to people, but you know what? I've been able to listen to your songs. I've been able to listen to the result of what I have been able to share with you guys on this channel, and see you guys putting that into practice and hearing your work as a result of what you've learned from my show, what you've learned from other stuff that's around on songwriting. And you know what? It has taught me a lot. Doing these challenges has taught me a lot. and has informed kind of where I'm going to be going with Songwriting Simplified in the course of the next 12 months in particular. And by the way, we are going to be continuing, as far as I'm aware, we are going to be continuing the Halloween and Christmas Songwriting Challenge, both of those challenges this year. And hopefully in next year as well. We'll see kind of what's going to happen with those two particular challenges. But I do aim to introduce some more challenges that maybe don't have a prize attached to them, but will be a challenge for you to partake in as much as they give you maybe particular music concepts and songwriting techniques that I've talked about here on this show for you to actually just go and apply immediately to a song. And then the idea will be for you guys to send me links of your published songs on SoundCloud or somewhere like that, or just send me the MP3. I don't mind if you just send me the MP3 and we'll listen to your songs together and see how you've applied these particular concepts that I've got in mind. So that's kind of those are the kind of challenges where there won't be prizes, but I would still love you to participate. Just even if there's no prize, just because there's a prize up for grabs doesn't mean you shouldn't take part. I would love it if you would take part regardless of whether there's a prize involved or not. So I'm really excited by some of those things that I've got in mind, and I will give you more details of those as we go forward. So I've got plenty of ideas up my sleeve for little challenges that we are going to do in the lead up to the Halloween and Christmas challenges that will basically help get some songwriting and arranging techniques in out there to you that you can just put into practice straight away, that will help inform you and prepare you for the prize challenges for Halloween and for Christmas as well. So that's kind of where things are going to go over the course of the remainder of this year, because we're kind of in May already. So May, June, July, August, September, October, into November, there will be a couple of challenges that will be informal, more kind of just to get some concepts out there, get you applying them, and then send me MP3s of what you've got, and we will listen to them together on a show. And at least there'll be an opportunity for your music to get broadcast as much as anything else, because it'll be broadcast right here on this show. So yeah, they got to be original songs. You can't do covers, but that's kind of where we're going to go for the remainder of this year. And then we will hit November with the Halloween challenge, which is going to be awesome. And then we are going to get into Christmas, which is also going to be great, because I'm going to set you a very, very cool challenge for Christmas, which I'm really excited about. And you know, once we've got past Halloween, there will be details on the Christmas challenge pretty much right after the Halloween challenge is all done and dusted. So that's where we're going. So stick around. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you maybe just, book this time in your calendar, 6 p.m. Central Time. Wherever you are in the world, 6 p.m. Central Time, midnight in the UK, 1 a.m. in Central Europe. Work out where you are in the world and look at dateandtime.com or something like that to figure out what time it exactly is for you, and maybe book it into your calendar. Make this a regular part of your week, and ask your questions away, and that will help get us all ready for the challenges upcoming later this year. So I'm excited by all of that. So thank you very much, everybody, for being with me through these 100 shows. And some of you have been here for literally every one. And you guys are awesome. And I appreciate you very, very much. Thank you, everybody. But we're not done yet. We are only 20 minutes into the show. And of course, Billy Morgan was first in the door as usual, followed by Mike, who I'm very glad is here. It's probably 20 past 6 in the morning for him, so he may well be having his cornflakes whilst watching this. We got Craig from the W5 family here as well, and he says hello to the center of the known universe. Yes, that would be Scotland, of course. Thank you. And we got Bobby Booth here. We got Tony Stringer. We've got Stephen Wilson. We've got Brett Marla, whose name is always fun to say with a Scottish accent. And then, of course, we got Dwayne here as well. We got Don Oliver. We've got Keith from Radio Tuck Trumpet. And Brett is saying very beautiful, and I'm pretty sure he is talking about my the piece of music for the opening of show 100. Let's see. Just Bob made it, which is awesome. Thank you for being here, Bob. You are a legend, most definitely. Let's see. Ron is here as well. AKA Keyman is here. Awesome. Thank you for being here. Harley Bob is here. Garden99 is here as well. And I think I have got everybody. I think. Yeah, it looks like I've got everybody. If I've missed you, I apologize. Just check in. Just say hello in the chat. If you are here and you're watching and I've missed your name, or you haven't said anything and that's why I've missed your name, then please do say so in the chat. That would be awesome. If you are watching and you're not subscribed, you won't be able to say anything in the chat, unfortunately, because it is subscriber mode only. So if you would like to ask a question, or if you'd like to just say hello, you can do. I would love you to. Please do hit the subscribe button and select all notifications. And once you have done that, give it literally 2 minutes, and then the chat will be open to you. And then you can ask your question about songwriting, composing, arranging, and if you've got a music theory question, we take those as well, because that's what this show is all about. So Billy says, usually here every Wednesday, some say early. Sometimes you are like 6 or 7 hours early. In fact, Billy Morgan, you have been known to be like 2 days early. MJ says, roosters are my life. Yeah, I would keep that to yourself, buddy, and make sure Venus doesn't know. For sure. MJ says, Mike says, I love the intro music, much better. What, much better than my jazz stuff? Yeah, I know you don't like my jazz stuff. That's okay. Mike says, I sleep during the day and awake at night. Yeah, your body clock is still on US time. I get that. Brett says, the song I'm currently working on has some stacked fourths. Yeah, I love quartal voicings. Quartal voicings are awesome. If you have no idea what that is, if you don't know what a quartal chord is, it's basically just take a note, like this one here, count up 4 notes to get an interval of a perfect fourth, and then do the same again, and you get a stack of fourths. Now you hear this a lot in modal music, so if you're playing Mixolydian mode or Dorian mode, you'll hear these kind of stacks get played quite a lot. So pretty common in jazz music, but you'll also hear it in you know, kind of more pop rock kind of music, like Steely Dan. There's a couple of songs that use these stacks of fourths, but Green Earrings is probably the most common of those. I mean, the whole song is basically made up of stacks of fourths. And then perhaps my favorite part which is a series of major 7 chords. But they sound so cool and sophisticated because but they contrast really nicely with the stacks of fourths. Yeah, Green Earrings, great song. And Larry Carlton's guitar playing on that is just absurd. It's absurdly good. There are several guitar solos throughout that song, which are utterly insane. And Larry is known for playing these incredibly insane guitar solos that just sound utterly composed, even though they are purely improvised. He does them in like one take. The guy is just amazing. And then there's the outro solo as well, which is just as absolutely nuts. It's well worth checking out, even if you're not a Dan fan, just for the songwriting. Listen to the arrangement, listen to the contrast between those stacks of fourths and the major sevenths. And then there's this musical interlude, which is, from a harmonic point of view, it's just mental because there's lots of nice major 7 chords, but then it almost goes off into a completely different key, and then it comes back, and then you're back into that, stack of fourths vamp. Which is very, very cool. It's a great song, really well written about, basically it's about theft and larceny and that kind of stuff. Okay, let's see. Do we have a question? Yeah, we do. Just Bob says, when layering chords, if in major, I presume major keys, should you stay in major or can you add minor chords on top, or will that clash? That is a good question. And the best answer to that is to try it. Try it, basically. All right, so let's take a minor chord. Let's take a major chord and stack a minor chord on top and see what we get. So let's take a C major chord. So we got a nice C major chord there. I can stack an E minor chord on top of that. And we end up with a C major 7 chord. Okay. But if I add like an E minor 7 on the top of a C major triad, you end up with C major 9, which is a nice little sound. And then you can keep going. You can keep stacking up there, and you can add a D major triad on top of that. And what you end up with is ultimately a C major 13 sharp 11 chord. So we have root 3rd, 5, major 7, 9, sharp 11, 13 on top. So essentially what that ends up being is a C major triad with a B minor 7 chord on top. There's the B minor 7 with the C major triad on the bottom. So we've got a major chord, major triad, minor 7 on top from a half step below. Okay, so let's try a minor chord with a major chord on top. So let's try C minor. And we'll go with a B flat major 7 on top. So what do we have? What do we end up with here? So we've got a C minor triad with a B flat major 7 on the top. So what does this give us? Well, this gives us a C minor 13 chord. So we have root 3rd, 5, flat 7, 9, 11, 13. So the answer to your question is yes, you can stack chords on top of each other. And for the most part, you will end up with something that just sounds good, for the most part. There are obviously going to be exceptions. For example, let's take a C major triad and put a B major triad on top of that. Now, it could be argued that sounds weird, and you would be correct. It does. What do we end up with? So we've got a C major 7 with a sharp 9 and a sharp 11. Now, the cool thing about that chord is it sounds a little bit kind of mysterious. So if you're writing for a film, for example, and you want to suggest some mystery, then a minor 6th chord does do the job as well. But I would argue that that sounds even more mysterious. It's more than mystery. It's now intriguing. We've gone from mystery to intrigue. So where are our little spice notes? Here. So we got this spice little interval here. And then we got another one here. So that's in root position. So the way that you can actually maybe make it a little less dissonant is by rearranging the chord tones in that chord to make it a little less, you're avoiding things like, that interval there, for example, and that interval, where you have what we would call a flat 9 interval. You can try and move the notes away from each other to avoid that minor 9 interval, but you may end up with, semitones next to each other, which is, when they're on their own, semitones can just sound a little bit awful, but when they're combined with other notes, doesn't sound so bad. If I was to put like a sharp 11 in this chord, I've got semitones there, semitones there. Sounds a bit ugly, right? There's a lot of dissonance there. But if I move these notes around a little bit and space out the voicing, I've got exactly the same notes, but now it sounds much more open. Okay? So you can have it close voiced, or you can have it nice and wide open. And I have gone a little bit blurry, haven't I? Yeah, I can see that. Give me a second. That didn't really help. Hang on. Let me see if I can fix the blurred camera. Sometimes that works. There we go. Fixed. There we go. Sorry, I had to smack you in the face to fix that. So, where was I? Yes. Opening up voicings can give you a dissonant chord without it being dissonant, which is what I did here. So it's still a major 7 sharp 11 chord, but I've moved the notes away from each other so they're not quite so closed up. So you can do those kind of things to make a dissonant chord sound less dissonant. Just kind of shove some of the notes up an octave maybe. Which is kind of what I've done here. So this note has gone up an octave. That one's actually still where it is. The major 7 is exactly where it was before. Yeah, so we're still at 1080p. But all I did was just smack the camera basically with my hand, and that was enough to fix that. All right, so So yes, you can absolutely stack chords on top of each other to get some interesting sounds. And you'll end up with, when you think about what the chords are, what the chord ends up being, it can sound really, really complex. And actually stacking triads is a good way to get something complex without really having to do a whole lot of, deep thinking about the harmony. So let's take this second inversion G major triad, and what we're going to do is we're going to put some fourths underneath that. Okay? So I've got, and then maybe another fourth down below that. So basically I've just taken a G major triad and then put fourths underneath it. And then just move this around a little bit. And you've got really sophisticated harmony without really trying. So again, let's take that G major triad, and then let's put let's put an E major triad underneath that. And what you've got there is E7 sharp 9, the Jimi Hendrix chord. Except in his case, he would have taken out the fifth. And he would have just left it like this. So you end up with, again, a sophisticated chord without a lot of hard work having to sort it out. Now, this is another way in which you can make something as simple as a 12-bar blues sound a lot more complex harmonically. And it also allows you to create melody by putting notes from another chord on top of it. So if we've got a C major chord, what I've just done there is put a D major triad on top of the C major triad. And again, you end up with something that gives a sense of mystery and, maybe a sense of openness. It doesn't sound like it's in any particular key. And I like doing that, actually. Take a major triad, put another major triad on top of it that's a tone above it. And what you end up with is you end up with a C major 6-9 sharp 11 chord. There. Complex sounding chord, complex sounding voicing, the nomenclature for the chord sounds complicated, but really it's just a D major triad on top of a C major triad. And you'll find that actually a lot of classical music from the middle 20th century, like from the 1940s, 1950s, they used that kind of harmony a lot. So, and what those are called polychords. So you're taking two different chords and you're putting them on top of each other. Herbie Hancock famously uses a lot of that kind of harmony as well. But you'll, in a more jazz-orientated context, but you'll hear composers like Tchaikovsky, Shostakovich, Bartók, Webern, Berg, particularly Berg before he decided to get into the 12-tone note system that Schoenberg was into. Prokofiev actually likes polytonal music where you have two keys at the same time. But you'll also hear Dvorak and Debussy. But Debussy in particular, in the kind of the 19 teens, so maybe like 1912, 1915, 1919, maybe 1920, during that period of Debussy's compositional period, you'll find a lot of those polychords where you've got chords stacked on top of each other. It's a popular thing with the Impressionist school in that early 20th century period, and then that gets extended by people like Prokofiev and Bartok and people like that into the late, the middle 20th century and on, and they in turn inspired composers like Varese to take that even further into the late 20th century and on. So let's see. Polytonal singing is really cool. Yes. Charles Ives. Yes. Charles Ives is another guy that makes a lot of use of polytonal music and polychords. He uses them more kind of almost in a modal context. Aaron Copland is another example of making use of stacked chords on top of each other. MJ says, without copyright strike, can you show an example of 5/4 similar to Take 5, but make it original? Yep, 5/4. 5/4 is actually a lot easier than you think. And I guess that little bit at the end could be that little bit at the end could well be, hit the road Jack, but in 5/4. Instead of what I just played there was definitely 5/4. So that was definitely 5/4. That one part. Yeah, okay, Mike. If you wanna write a song in 5/4, send it and we'll play it next week. I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, write me something original in 5/4, Mike, and then send it to me. And then we'll play it next week. I'd be happy to hear it. Anyone got any other questions? I'm just going up to see. Oh yeah, Billy says Ziggy's S1 meetup is at 9 p.m. Eastern, which is going to be 8 p.m. Central, which is going to be 2 o'clock in the morning UK time, 3 o'clock in the morning if you're in Europe. Keith says, love stacking chords. You get lots of fires. Yeah. Maybe. Minor keys often sound happy and upbeat. Minor keys are frequently associated. Sorry, major keys. Sorry, I'll read it properly this time. Major keys often sound happy and upbeat. Minor keys are frequently associated with sadness. Yeah, either sadness or a sense of urgency. So, for example, Green Earrings, it's not really a minor key. It's modal. But it does have that sense of urgency about it. But because it's open sounding, it does kind of sound a little bit minor. Kind of like anything that's in Dorian mode, for example. Like, so what? Kind of has that sense of urgency. Again, because it's minor. So yeah, minor keys definitely can sound sad. They can sound really, really sad. They can sound really, really dark, Again, it depends upon your choice of minor key. I think it was Beethoven that said that D minor is the darkest and saddest of all keys. He might be right. Yeah, I think it's pretty sad. I also think C minor is pretty dark. C minor is definitely quite dark as well. But yeah, minor keys are definitely dark, or they have a sense of urgency about them. Whereas major keys, I mean, you can write a sad song in a major key. There's plenty of those. For a minor key to sound urgent, does tempo affect that, or is it a choice of chords? I guess maybe tempo can certainly help. Carl is here, I think. Yeah, I think I saw him come into the chat, which is awesome. He is here. Welcome, my friend. And Dave Barslow is also here. Welcome, guys. Welcome to show 100 of Songwriting Simplified. Ron says there should be a 7/4 challenge that will be submitted for July 4th. You know what? I like that idea. We're a little kind of short on time for that, but yeah, if you want to write something that's in 7/4 and you want to release it on July 4th, then yeah, go ahead and do it, and I will play it. Now, is July 4th gonna be on a Wednesday? Let's have a look. No, it's not. It's going to be on a Friday. That's disappointing. I think we have to wait a few years before it is. But that's a great idea. releasing a 7/4 piece on July 4th. I think that's a great idea. Let's see. Is major and minor keys played together considered as fusion? Not in the sense of fusion being a genre, but if you were to play major and minor keys together, it could be a little bluesy because, you know, you have the major third and the minor third being played at the same time, which can lend to, that's kind of blues where you've got the minor third and major third kind of played together. But if you were to play, like, here's something that a saxophone player, bass clarinetist, sadly no longer with us, a guy called Eric Dolphy. One of the things he used to do was, if there was a minor chord, like C minor, he would play C major over the top of it. Because it would give you that kind of clash. But equally, he would also, if you have a minor chord, a major chord, play a minor arpeggio over the top. For the same reason, is it kind of gives you that kind of neither major, neither minor, blue kind of sound to it. Playing the relative minor will work over major changes. Yes, it will. Yeah. So if you are in C major and you play the Aeolian mode, it will work because the notes of the Aeolian mode also are mirrored by the Ionian mode, which is the major scale. So yes, it will work. Dave also says, how does a key change in jazz impact improvisation? Does it open up new possibilities or present challenges for musicians? Depends upon where the key is to start with and then where it goes to. So for example, if you're a jazz player, you like to play mostly in flat keys. So I'm talking like B flat major, F major, E flat major. Those kind of keys are the most common keys in jazz music. And so if you then go to a sharp key, like say A major, let's say you're playing in E flat, so and you go to the key of A major from there, then it's a different scale for a start. Now, here's the thing that maybe makes it a little awkward. Different instruments are pitched in different keys. So an alto saxophone, for example, is in the key of E flat. So when I'm playing in E flat, that's kind of okay because that puts the alto saxophone in C major. But if I then go from the key of E flat major to A major, well, that puts the alto saxophone in F sharp major. So for a lot of saxophone players, that's awkward, particularly if a jazz saxophone player, sharp keys are awkward. But when you're playing rock music, you kind of, if you're playing rock music a lot, you're an alto sax player playing in a lot of rock bands, you tend to get used to playing in sharp keys more than you play in flat keys. So different contexts will make playing in certain keys more awkward than playing in other keys, because it depends upon what you are used to the most. So seeing as you're talking about a jazz situation, jazz musician, mostly we play in flat keys. So mostly if somebody says, hey, let's play a blues, it's mostly going to be an F or it's going to be B flat. Occasionally it'll be in a one sharp key. So we're talking G major. Occasionally we'll play a blues in G, or it'll be a blues in C, but it's mostly going to be C, F, B flat, maybe E flat. Because those are less difficult for a saxophone. So if you're in E flat, that puts you in an alto sax in C major. If you are in B flat, that puts them in G. It's just one sharp. It's not too difficult. If you're in F major, then that puts the alto sax into D major. It's two sharps. It's not a big deal. It's when you start piling up the sharps and you start getting, hey, let's play a blues in E. That's great for guitar players, because ultimately, we don't really think about this, but the guitar ultimately is basically an E. Or technically it's in E minor. But we don't really think of it that way. We think of it as a concert pitch instrument. But it is essentially in E. So guitar players, they learn in E and A and D and G. So, an E major song is going to put an alto sax player into C sharp major, which is a lot of sharps in the key signature. And, they have to start thinking about some unusual intervals, like, or some unusual enharmonic notes, like, for example, an E sharp. Well, what's an E sharp? An E sharp is the same as an F, but you don't think of it as an F in C sharp major, but it is. It's just a different enharmonic spelling of the note F. In a certain context, it will be an E sharp, because in the key of C sharp major, the F is already sharp. So if the F is already sharp, you need to figure out what are we going to call this note here? The major third in C sharp. It's got to be called something, but the F is already sharp. So it can't be called F sharp. So you have to think of it as E sharp. There's E, E sharp. So there are certain keys where you are going to that could be awkward for a saxophone player, which is why key changes don't tend to be like particularly distant. They tend to be closely related. So if you're doing a blues in B flat, for example, you may do a key change up into C major. I've been at jam sessions where we've done blues, and we sat there for 2 or 3 hours playing a blues, and we might change the key a few times to make it easier for a certain instrument, a certain player who maybe isn't really familiar with flat keys. So if we're doing a blues in B flat, we might go down to A, for example. Bit easier for a guitar. So we have a guitar player comes on, and he really is a blues guy. He's not really a jazz guy. So we'll do the blues in A, and then, he goes and takes a seat. He goes to the bar, and maybe a tenor sax player comes on. Oh, great. We can go back to B flat now. Because it's nice and easy for him. That puts him in C major. So there's all of those kind of things to think about. Musicians that you're playing with. But at the end of the day, contemporary jazz musicians 21st century jazz musicians, we live in the post-bebop era. What does that mean? That means that in the post-1945 era of jazz music, you can play in any key. You know, no key is a duff key to play in anymore. You know, in the swing era, most songs were written in the aforementioned flat keys, F, B flat, and E flat, and C major. So, you know, those were the predominant keys of swing music. And then, you know, you get Charlie Parker, who obsessively practices saxophone in all 12 keys because he didn't really realize that most music of the time was written in a handful of keys. So he learned to play his horn in C sharp. So, you know, what that meant was that they could write a blues in C sharp and they could all play it. And it became very, very easy. And so, you know, you basically learn how to play in all 12 keys. Otherwise, you get left behind and nobody wants to hire you. Nobody wants to play with you if you can't play in all 12 keys. So, you know, I don't know if you guys have ever come across the YouTube channel. I know Keith has, in particular, a YouTube channel called Open Studio. And they are jazz-based, but they teach you a lot about harmony, chord changes, improvisation, stuff like that. And one of the things they say at the end of every one of their short little 30-second videos is take it through all 12 keys. So learn the concept, then learn that concept in all 12 keys. And then you'll be good to go. What do they mean by that? They mean that you'll be able to play with any musician, anywhere, anytime, and use that concept that you've just learned, because you will have taken it through all 12 keys. You'll be secure in all 12 keys with a lot of practice. And then, you know, you'll be able to use that particular phrase, that particular lick, that particular improvisational style or figure, whatever it is that you've learned, in all 12 keys. So that's kind of the idea behind that. So the short answer, therefore, the summary of your question, Dave, is you can go to any key these days in a jazz context. It's a good question, though. Are there any historical or cultural reasons why certain blues songs lean towards minor keys instead of major? You get major and minor blues. I mean, if you're going back to the root of the blues, a lot of those come out of the slave trade. So a lot of those songs are about hardship and suffering and hard work and that kind of thing. So yeah, they are predominantly in minor keys. But you also get, out of that, you get spiritual music, which influences the church. And some of those, and you know, not all of them, but a lot of those are in a major key. And then flash forward 20 years, 30 years to the 1950s, and you get the advent of the blues ballad, where a lot of those are in major keys and make use of a lot of major sevenths and those kind of things. If you want a really fine example of a blues ballad, check out Donald Fagen's Maxine from the Night Flight album, 1982. Not only does that feature a phenomenal tenor saxophone solo by Michael Brecker, but it also features some absolutely glorious kind of close barbershop style 1950s doo-wop style vocal harmonies. And it's a brilliantly well-written song. And it basically, it is written fabulously in that 1950s blues ballad style. So if you want to hear and that's a really good example of a blues ballad. It has a lot more chord changes than just 1, 4, and 5 that you typically find in a blues. But it's kind of jazz orientated, you know, doo-wop style blues music. It's well worth checking that song out. And with that, folks, we are at the end of the show. Thank you very much for all of your questions. I appreciate it a lot. And thank you for being here for, you know, for all 100 shows. Those of you that have been here for every single show, you guys are epic. You guys are awesome. And I thank you very, very much for your support. Those of you that have just joined just today, you guys are just as epic too. Thank you very much for being here, everybody, and for all of your support over these 100 shows. And to finish the show, we go back to where we started, which is with VE Day. So happy VE Day, everybody, and a very good night.